Skill number two is know your pace, right? Every section has its own pacing strategy to work on. This is assuming that you have regular time. If you have extended time, like time and a half or double time due to accommodations, you don't have to worry about this. And you can just send us an email to questions@mindspireprep.com. Let me write that. That is the general questions@mindspireprep.com. And ask if you have any pacing questions about extended time. For the most part, there are fewer issues. If you have regular time, pacing can definitely be an issue on the ACT. You have to know your timing for each one, how to pace yourself appropriately, and here's a guideline. So first of all, the writing section, otherwise known as, I should say, the English section. You have 5 passages and 75 questions in 45 minutes. And if you do the math, that means 9 minutes per passage. Most students find this is a fast paced, but it becomes manageable. Most students in the end don't have a problem with pacing on the English section after they just do 2 or 3 practice passages. They're like, okay, you get it. You can move pretty quickly. It's really important to time yourself during practice sections so that you get comfortable with the pacing. But in general, it shouldn't be an issue. If it is an issue, and this is a general rule for everything, you have to have a stopwatch that doesn't make noise. You're allowed to bring it to the ACT, and you need to keep an eye on it and know when 9 minutes are up. And when 9 minutes are up, it's time to move a little bit more quickly, finish up, and move to the next passage. Okay, you don't want to blow out your entire thing because you get stuck on 1 or 2 questions, and then you run out of time for the last passage. That's no good. Math, 60 questions in 60 minutes. That is a challenging pace for most students, especially in the beginning. Okay. Getting familiar with the timing is very important, right? So, one of the most important ideas here is this: you need to get an idea for how many math questions you're aiming to work on, then practice pacing yourself to that standard. What that means is that, so if let's look at the next sentence. You can get a 28 on most math sections and miss everything the last 10 questions. So the idea here is that if you're rushing and getting a whole bunch of stuff wrong on the math section in order to finish the section, but then you miss all of the last 10 anyway, then the rushing is causing you to lose more points than you should. Instead, what you should do is say, I'm going to have 60 minutes to do 50 questions. I'm not going to even try the last 10. And then you'll miss fewer of them and you'll get a higher score overall because you would have missed the last 10 questions anyway. So if you're aiming for a 36, you do need to do all 60 questions, of course. And by practicing, you'll get faster. But the most important thing here is practice with timing eventually. In the beginning, you should not practice with timing. In the beginning of practice, your goal is to just learn how to get the questions right. In other words, to increase your accuracy. Okay, I'll write this down. First, work on accuracy, then work on timing. Okay, so that's the pattern. But once you do work on the timing, you want to watch the clock and you want to get an idea of where you should be, right? If you want to really finish all 60 of them, then at number 30, you should definitely be under 30 minutes. It should be closer to 25 or 24 minutes. If your goal is to get a 28, you don't have to worry about that. You're gonna have 60 questions, 60 minutes to do 50 questions. Okay, so that gives you a sense of how to work through the math timing. Reading, there are 4 passages, 40 questions, 35 minutes. Okay, on average, that gives you 8 minutes and 45 seconds per passage. I'll write that down. 8 minutes and 45 seconds per passage. So the hardest thing about the reading section is the pacing. It's that is fast for most students. There are some students who don't have a problem with it, but that's like 1 out of 5. 4 out of 5 students have a hard time with the pacing on the reading, and it is one of the primary challenges that you have to overcome. So we will talk about reading more efficiently, and and the timing will get easier. And we'll talk about skimming, and we'll talk about how to get a lot of information without necessarily reading every word or every detail. But the first thing to notice is that if you need more time than this, if you just can't read the passage and answer the questions in 8 minutes and 45 seconds, then one thing you might want to do is try, for example, what we call the 10-10-10-5 strategy. Okay. I'll write that here. 10, 10, 10, 5. That means 10 minutes on the first 3 passages and 5 minutes on the last passage, or on just the hardest passage. And one thing to get to know is which passage is hardest for you. Do that last. Okay. So what this, I've seen students who switch to this 10-10-10-10-10-10-5 strategy, and immediately their score bumped up. So it allows you to take an extra minute or so on 3 passages and therefore get everything right on them, or close to everything right. And then on that last passage, you just go right to the questions and try to pick off the easiest ones. Okay. This is the pacing on the reading section is something that you have to get used to over time and see what happens for you. You might be able to do all 4 passages in about 8 minutes and 45 seconds after some practice, and then it's not an issue. You might need to do something more like 10-10-10-5, or maybe 9-9-9-7, or something like that, where you maximize your points on your 3 easier passages, and then you just try to get what you can from the 4th one. It's going to be one of those things. But again, you got to pay attention to the clock no matter what. You got to pay attention to your watch. And last, we have the science, 40 questions in 35 minutes. And I should add here, it's 6 passages. So on average, you have about 6 minutes per passage. When you first start trying the science section, almost all students will run out of time in the beginning because it's really unfamiliar and it's really just something that you've never quite seen before. Okay, but once you do get a hang of it, most students do manage to come close to finishing every question. Maybe you have 1 or 2 or 3 questions left at the end that you don't get to, and that's okay, as long as you're really maximizing your points on the first 36 or 37 questions. Okay. The basic problem is trying to read all of every passage. You don't have to read the passage almost at all. You go right to the questions and you figure out question by question what you need to know. You go back to the passage, you find the stuff in the chart, and then you answer the question. Okay. And that saves a lot of time. All right. And you'll get better at that. We'll discuss that more once we get deeper into the science. Okay. Once you learn to focus on the key information in each passage, you'll find that they move much more quickly. So these are general pacing guidelines. It takes time to get used to it. Practice taking full sections is essential, right? You have to take full ACT sections or full tests and time yourself and watch the clock and all of that. If you are a fast test taker and you have time left over, that's nice, but you need to slow down. You don't want to have 5 minutes left over at the end of the English passage. You want to finish with 1 minute left over. What we have here is finish at the buzzer. Maybe not with 1 second left, but with a minute left. That's appropriate. Finishing with 5 or 10 minutes left means you've probably gotten some wrong because you've gone too fast, and you're not going to find them once you get to the end. You have to get them right when you're doing them. The idea of, oh, I'll just come back to this and check it later, that almost never happens because you forget that to ever go back to it, or you don't even remember what the issue was in the first place. You want to get them right when you're doing it, and you want to finish your section at the buzzer. That's the idea. Okay? So memorize the timings, memorize the pacing, right? 8:45 per passage on the reading. It's about 6 minutes per passage on the science, and then 9 minutes per passage on the English, and 60 minutes on the math. And try different pacing until you find the one that works best for you using some of these ideas. If you have more questions, you can ask us at, again, questions@mindspireprep.com.